Hello and welcome to the first episode of Coyote C.A.R.E.S Beneath the Surface. As you may already know, ever since the start of the pandemic, there has been an increase in Asian hate events. Some of them were minor aggressive behavior laden with racist remarks and vandalism, while others were more serious like actual physical assault and even murder, many of which were against the elderly. Throughout 2020 and 2021, violence against Asian Americans and Asians around the world has been escalating. And with more and more events being brought up on social media and eventually mainstream media, fear and anxiety crept into the hearts and minds of people within our Clarksburg community. Early in March, in efforts to allay the rising anxiety felt by students and parents of our community, Mr. Owusu sent out messages against hate and violence, and how we at Clarksburg value being good and doing good. However, on March 16th, violence against Asian Americans went over the top when 8 people at 3 different massage parlors were shot and killed, 6 of whom were women of Asian descent. But the response from our community to this tragic event was relatively silent. Students of all races, all across MCPS, were left confused, outraged, hurt, and disillusioned, seeking safe spaces on their own through organizations like AAPI and MoCo for Change. And as students all over the county and here at Clarksburg were looking for safe spaces and allies, they continue to hear silence. This is why we're here. The violence against Asians and Asian Americans is nothing new. The reasons are multi-layered and very complex. And you have to know the history of our country to really understand why this is happening. Clarksburg High School and our community is not immune to hate. In a diverse community such as ours, there will be misconceptions, misinformation, and misinterpretations, all of which leads to frustration, anger, and hate. This is why we need to have a space to have true, real, genuine, and deep conversations about race, culture, and equity. Some of us fear offending others, while some of us fear being called out, while others are just in fear. Thus, we remain silent. We need to talk. May is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Therefore, we're going to kick off our multi-series conversation about race and equity with dialogue between Clarksburg students and teachers. Your hosts are going to be students from Clarksburg High School, and we hope that our discussion and testimonies will generate compassion, empathy, and allyship. We hope that this will bring solidarity and assuage any fear and anxiety. We also hope that this will be just the beginning of the much needed conversation that is beyond just the fluff. So let's dig deep and go beneath the surface. So without further ado, here are our hosts for tonight's episode.
We are your hosts today. I'm Evelyn Jang, and I'm currently a junior.
I'm Emily Lett, and I'm currently a sophomore.
And I'm Tiana Trin, and I'm a sophomore. Today we'll hear from 2 panels. The first will be the students, your peers. So joining us today, we have Grace Choi, Noah Kadir, and ZJ Lin.
We will then get the adults' perspective of our teachers panel. Today we have Mr. Kim and Mrs. Jaffe.
Finally, we have a couple of special guests with a message for the Clarksburg community, so please stay with us until the end to hear from them. We're going to ask our questions first to the student panel. Our first question is, as a student of Asian descent, what has your experience at Clarksburg High School or MCPS been like?
Well, for me, it's actually been pretty good, to be honest. I've never really felt like I've been discriminated against. People welcome me here, And I feel like as a student here, I'm lucky uh, to have this sort of camaraderie around the student body.
For me, I feel like Clarksburg High School is is one of the more diverse schools compared to other schools in MCPS, and I'm really grateful to have grown up in a diverse area. Overall, I feel like at MCPS it's been pretty good. Okay, our next question is, have you ever felt like you didn't belong here at CHS?
Well, for me, no. And I feel like it's actually been the opposite. And like you said, Evelyn, Clarksburg is pretty diverse. And I feel like our school prides itself on that. They really try to make everyone feel that they belong, that they're not outsiders at all. And I feel like that's a great thing for the school.
For me as well, I don't feel like I don't belong here. Like, I've had a lot of friends that are like different descents and they have similar experiences. I feel like that kind of helps me like feel that I'm not just alone.
I haven't been to Clarksburg High School, but Clarksburg as a whole, I feel like is very diverse and very inclusive. And from Clarksburg High School, the emails and some of the messages that are sent to students feel very welcoming to everybody and inclusive.
So Noah, you said you haven't been to Clarksburg High School yet. So what middle school did you go to?
I went to Halliwell Middle School, and my experience there was pretty good as it was very diverse and inclusive with its students. However, some of the students there were a bit racist towards Asian students, and among those was myself. And I do have some anxieties of going to high school as there's a lot more people present there compared to middle school, and I don't know how a lot of them might treat minorities or.
Just to add to that, like if I were a middle schooler going to high school and like for the first time after experience like seeing all these Asian hate crimes, um, I would feel pretty anxious. Like even not just like in school, but just like going out in general. I still have the thought in the back of my head, like, oh my God, they probably think I have corona or they feel negative thoughts towards me, you know? And I was just wondering if you guys also felt that as well.
I think every person of color would think that in their back of the mind because I think everyone, even including Asian Americans, will always have like experiences of racism or just hate crimes in general. There will be times where people will go out and they'll stare at you not because the way you look, because your race. Like, do they think I have corona? Will they treat me differently? Like everyone will think that.
Well, I know this is the student part, but I'm just going to chime in here. I know as an adult, when I go out into the public, like when I go to the supermarket, I feel like I'm on alert and I'm like hyper alert and I'm always looking around. And then when somebody's looking at me, I'm like, whoa, that person looked at me just a second longer than they usually would. And it makes me feel very uncomfortable. And then it puts me on edge. And I've never felt that before. I was so comfortable being here in Clarksburg because I'm originally from Philly. But being here, I was like, whoa, everything was pretty like laid back and everything was chill. But then when these hate crimes started happening and when you start seeing these things, oh yeah, I felt being very hypersensitive and hyper aware of what was around me.
I definitely agree. I feel like I'm a lot more on edge as like opposed to before Corona. And like when I'm walking down the street and stuff and like people cross across the street to stay away from me, in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, is that because I'm Asian or is that just because, they don't want to be around other people?
So our next question for the panel is, Do you have conversations about Asian hate with your parents or your peers?
Yeah, for me, I talked to my mom about the Atlanta shootings regarding the massage parlors. Um, I talked with my mom because she herself is a massage therapist, and despite that, the shootings happened miles and miles away from here. I still get worried for her, and I think like what if this could happen to her? And personally, it's just unfortunate that I had to have that conversation with her, that I had to fear for her safety.
For me personally, I did talk about my parents with this and other experiences with Asian hate crimes, and their usual response is either to just like suck it up and deal with it. That's how they dealt with everything in their past lives. That's how they dealt with immigrating from Vietnam to here. They always just sucked it up and deal with it because back then, like Americans despised the Vietnamese, right? Coming after the Vietnamese War, and they they did not care. They just went through it, and now they're very more successful than most people. But they always just suck it up and deal with it. So that's my experience.
I would just like to add to that, like when the Asian hate crimes happened, my parents, like, we didn't have a conversation. Like, we just like stayed silent. Like, they didn't talk to me about anything. I didn't bring it up because I wanted to talk about it, but I just didn't have like, I don't know, any cues to, or there wasn't any right time to. So I didn't really talk about it until like months or like weeks later. And when I did talk about it, um, the response was also just to like stay silent. But I think that's just um, like the way Asian culture is just to stay silent and just endure it. But I think that's what perpetuates the hate towards us. It's just that because we don't say anything, like people think, oh, it's fine, but it's not.
For me, I would say like if I don't really have the conversation because they think in a sense it was triggering to them because it takes back in their days when they immigrated to America and then like they experienced the racism and they never had a chance to talk about it because they were taught to not talk about it at all. So I think that's why like whenever I try to bring it up, they brush it off. It's like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like that's just a normal thing, but like it's not a normal thing.
I have had a conversation with my parents about the Asian hate that's been going around previously. They really just told me to be careful out there and just to be protective of my grandparents, especially because a lot of the Asian hate has been centered around the elderly.
So the next question is, do you feel like you have strong non-East Asian allies?
I would say yes because um, all over social media, you know how people would share certain events, anti-Asian hate. I feel like they really want to spread awareness about anti-Asian hate, and I think that's a great thing. I believe that we are lucky to, or at least I'm lucky to have these friends that really do care about the hate going around.
For me, it's a yes because I have friends, and when the Asian hate crimes started happening, like back in March, they they regularly checked up on me. So I was like kind of grateful that I did because I was scared, and like my family were scared. It made me feel much more secure, and I realized that I have a strong connection with my friends, and they consider themselves allies. So like I'm really grateful that they are.
And I think that's one of the strengths that I see at Clarksburg High School. This is just my second year at the high school. And whenever I look at the way the groups of students are walking through the halls or when they're eating lunch in the hallway, it's usually a nice mix of students. So when I see that potential of having a lot of close and strong allies. So I think that's great for our community.
The next question is the staff being supportive. Do you guys feel comfortable turning to staff members for support?
Yeah, definitely. I think they are being supportive, and that kind of shows like through this. Uh, I would like to say thank you, Mr. Kim and Ms. Jaffe. Uh, you two are definitely supportive in this situation. But I will say that sometimes I'm not comfortable going to staff about my situation because I feel like it's kind of awkward to do so. I feel like I'm sort of bothering people, that I'm being a burden. And I feel like it's both a cultural thing and something that's been taught to me by my parents. My parents teach me not to bother people too much, and society teaches you to do the same. Like, don't bother people if you can do yourself.
I feel like I do have a lot of allies in the staff because a lot of them actually address the anti-Asian hate crimes that happened, and not only that, but just other racist events.
I think it's definitely a cultural thing because staff are very supportive, and that's kind of the job to support their students. But it's just all of us grew up in very like I guess you would say conservative households where it's just you have to suck it up and you have to deal with it. We've never been taught to like, oh, open up to your feelings, tell me what's wrong, because like even like with the talk of my parents, they're just like, if you deal with racism, if you deal with hate, just suck it up and deal with it. I've never had the chance or never felt like I needed the chance to talk to staff because I've never been taught that.
And especially with online school, it's harder to like approach somebody. So that's why I think having like discussions like these, where it's like a set discussion talking about specifically different issues, is really important because it gives students an opportunity to talk about like their feelings. So the next question is, besides your parents, is there another trusted adult that you feel comfortable talking to about race and other school issues?
Well, for me, I have uh, my church. Uh, so, so my church is actually very supportive, because I go to a Chinese church, and revolving around these events, they have reached out to everyone in the church, and I'm lucky to have people that are loving and caring like that. And I hope that other people have uh, other people have people like that. Yeah.
For me, I guess it would be a few of my friends' parents because like I have a good relationship with them as well because like as I've gone closer with my friends, like I've happened to met their parents too, and they're of other races, so like that kind of makes me feel more comfortable because they're also supporters as well. So that makes me have like another like a safe place to go to if like I don't have another, you know, person to talk to about these issues. So yeah.
I think we can transition to the teacher panel and ask them questions now. So, to the teachers, as a teacher of Asian descent, what has your experience at Clarksburg High School or MCPS been like?
I've been at Clarksburg High School. I think this is my 14th or 15th year. I can't remember. I started the second year the school was open. And I'm not exactly sure when Clarksburg opened. And I can safely say, you know, my experience with at Clarksburg High School just has been overwhelmingly positive. Positive. I mean, the students are great. And I've never felt hostility regarding the fact that I'm Asian from my students. Um, and I feel like all of you have been saying, I think that's in large part due to the fact that we live in a very diverse community and that's reflected in the school.
Yeah, and my experience at Clarksburg is very limited because I've only been here for 2 years. But yeah, I would say the same.
Mhm.
As I said, with the diversity and something's being done right, and something is actually progressing where the different ethnicities and races are kind of melding together. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but um,
Mhm.
I've had experienced some stuff before, but never here well, hopefully won't ever, but uh, haven't really felt anything at Clarksburg or even at my previous school. But yeah, at Clarksburg, it's awesome, and I
Yeah.
think if there are students, because I've heard that some students are feeling some anxiety about coming back to the building, or I've heard that their parents are also a little worried about having their kids come to the high school. But from my experience so far, I think it's been great.
Yeah, I agree.
So the next question for the teachers are, have you experienced as a teacher any racist comments directed towards you from students?
Um, I can say it was just one minor incident, and afterwards, I thought to myself, was I just being overly sensitive? What happened was I was downstairs in the lobby, and I think it was during lunch. This happened years ago. And this one student who I was familiar with was either blocking the hallway or he was doing something. And I told him, I said, like, you need to move along. And he turned around and said something like, told me something like, leave me alone and go make my lunch or go make my food. And I took that as, how there's a lot of like Asian and Chinese carryouts. And I kind of took it like he was like talking to me, like talking down to me, like telling me to, like instead of treating me like a teacher, like just telling me to go make him like his food or lunch, like he would talk to someone he did not know. And it it bothered me. So I spoke to him and we kind of carried up a notch, and we did have a conversation about it, and he insisted he meant nothing by it. It was because it was during lunch and he wanted to go have his lunch, so he was telling me to go have my lunch or something like that. But he insisted he meant nothing racial about it. And then afterwards I was like, was I just being overly sensitive? So that was it. And I would say that's really minor.
Well, I know I kind of alluded to this kind of situation, not at Clarksburg High School. I used to teach over at Shady Grove Middle School. This was an incident that happened about 10 years ago. 10 years ago when I was teaching up in Pennsylvania. Um, I was coming in into the building in the morning, and we have some rules in the building where all the students, if they come early, they have to be in the cafeteria, and they're places where they're designated to be. But then I saw this one student who wasn't where he was supposed to be.
Mhm.
So as I was going into my classroom, I said to him, "Hey, you got to go to the cafeteria." And without even looking up, he just mumbles to himself and he goes, "Yeah, whatever, Mr. Ching Chong." And I was like, "Whoa, what did you just say?" And then he was like, "Nothing. I didn't say anything." Right. So I was like, "All right, you know what? I did hear what you said. So let's take a trip over to the principal's office or the AP's office." With everything that he did, nothing happened. There was no disciplinary action whatsoever. He was allowed basically to get away with calling me Mr. Ching Chong. So that was my experience with racism at the high school level. Um, but here at Clarksburg, yeah, nothing. It's all been positive.
So our next question is, of your years of teaching at Clarksburg High School, do you feel like you experienced a improvement in experiencing of racism?
Okay, yes, and I think in large part it comes from the top. I mean, Mr. Usu has just been great, and the other administrators. So over the years, my personal experience at Clarksburg High School has been it's increasingly become more and more positive, friendly, and more people are becoming aware of um, their interactions with people who are different from them. So it's gotten much better. And I would just say staff, they're not above being being rude or being hostile. And I think students, Asian American students, if you do feel that from a staff member, I know as Asians, we have this great respect for authority and for teachers. But if you guys feel any hostility or any rudeness coming even from staff members, you need to call them out. It might be a misunderstanding, or it might be a real hostility, but we need to speak out. Like other students, other minority students, they call out staff members. They're not shy about it, and I think we need to be the same. Whether it's staff or student, we cannot stay silent. And adults, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. We might not be aware of what we're saying, what we're doing, and we need to be held accountable by our students. That's the way I feel.
And I don't know if you guys, if the students are aware of this, but surprisingly, even up in Pennsylvania, at my old school, and then the schools down here, teachers are going through programs and having professional development in um, in equity studies, right? So we're looking at equity and race and culture, and even if our faculty isn't diverse, they are given a chance to look at and talk to other people, read books, and go to other like professional development sessions to really learn about other cultures and to see the other perspective other than the Eurocentric white perspective. And it is pretty quite amazing how quickly the teachers, especially the white teachers, to accept and to try to understand the minority perspective. Because I was not an activist at all. I was probably the furthest from being an activist as far as equity, as racial and cultural equity is concerned. But I did take this grad class, and when I was taking this grad class, um, I just remember one of the professor asked a whole bunch of teachers, can um, can minorities be racist? And here I was thinking, I'm a minority. I know the answer to this question. And I said, yeah, minorities can be racist, right? I've seen tons of minorities who are racist. And then she spoke out and she said, no, minorities cannot be racist because uh, racism is about power. And in this country, white people are the one with power. So only white people can be racist. And then I was like, what? Because all around me were all just white teachers. And I was like cringing. I was like, oh, someone's gonna come out and yell and say, that's preposterous, and I thought someone was gonna like say something against that. But to my surprise, everyone in that room was like, and then they started thinking about it, and then they accepted it. And then I was like, what just happened here? So that was my very first exposure and this journey towards racial equity and cultural diversity and diversity training. And then, unfortunately, at my old school, they didn't take it as seriously. But when I came down here to MCPS, at Shady Grove Middle School, and then especially here at Clarksburg, um, the training that the teachers go through, and the openness that I see from the teachers, and the genuine concern that some of the teachers have. I'm not gonna say all the teachers, but some of the teachers have. The It's just unbelievable. So if you could just get a glimpse of the discussions that are being held by your teachers, I think you'd be blown away.
I just want to say it's preposterous how your professor thinks that racism is about power. It's not. It's about disrespecting like other groups of people just in general. I can't say the N-word or I can't say anything else that's discriminatory to other races. Just how a white person can't say it. It really isn't about power. It's just about disrespecting other races and their culture.
And Emily, this is exactly what I thought, right? So on my journey, on my first step and my first leg of this journey, that's what I thought too. Because I was like, you know what? I've seen some of my friends who are Asians and they say some pretty racist stuff. And I was like, you know what? We could be racist. But when we have a conversation of race, this is why sometimes the conversation breaks down, because people have in different circles different definitions of racism. All right. So when we talk about things like institutionalized and systemic racism, then this is where we look at power. So in our country, right, in our country, and this is probably one of those conversations that we'll probably have. I would love to have in our future episodes, but there are so many different levels of racism. So what you're talking about is more like the personal racism between people to people. But when it comes to racism, like systemic and institutionalized racism, that's when it's the majority, who's basically white people.
Okay, so the next question is, how do you feel about how the county and the school reacted to the Asian hate crimes?
I like the way our school, Clarksburg High School, handled it and is handling it. I'm so happy that Mr. Owusu held that forum where we were able to voice how we feel. But I don't think the county is doing enough countywide to address this issue and put it in the forefront, and making the county and the students and parents aware that this is a serious issue facing our county and the Asian American students and family who live in this county. Because the attacks that are happening, they're happening in very diverse communities. San Francisco.
And Ms. Jaffe, I think your mic is going out right now. So I'm going to take a moment to step in here. As far as the response from, again, from our high school, I agree with Ms. Jaffe
Yes.
that with Mr. Wusu, like before the shooting happened, right? He did send out a tweet, and he sent out a communication thing saying that he supports the Asian American community and he's against any form of hatred. But I think the way that he went, our students didn't hear it and they just weren't aware of it. So I wish our students would know how much our school does support us and is behind us. And then our faculty and our staff as well, they are all behind us and supporting us. But when it comes to the county, like I was watching and looking at Mr. Owusu's Twitter or our high school's Twitter feed, and you could see people saw that post and then just ignored it. Other high school principals I thought would fall in line and say, hey, we also are against Asian hate. You know, we saw the NFL do it, the NBA said it, Disney said it, ESPN said it, right? There are all these companies that are coming out saying that they're against Asian hate, and Mr. Owusu said it. He's against Asian hate. But then that was it. Crickets. I didn't hear from anybody else, especially from our county, until the event where 6 Asian women were murdered. And then that's when some of the conversations came out, but apparently not enough. Because when I went to those forums where students were literally just saying, where are the principals? The students were crying, where's the leadership? And because there was a vacuum, the students had to take charge. They had to take lead. And it broke my heart. It really did. It broke my heart to see that we as adults didn't take the charge to protect and give our students that outlet. And it was shameful. And this is why I think it was important for us to have these conversations, because the past other conversations that are being held, the forums, the town halls, they're all being led by students, which is great. Which is great that I'm seeing student activism and students being leaders. But you're students. And it's our responsibility. It's the teacher's responsibility. It's the adult responsibility to allow you guys to have the space to share what you're feeling and to say, hey, we're gonna be okay. There's a lot of hatred. There's always been hatred, but we're gonna be okay because we have people who support us. You guys have allies. And as I said before, walking through the halls, there's so much diversity, and just not pockets of diversity, but it's a good mixture of diversity where people are all supporting each other. And yet, even amongst that, we do have students who feel anxious. So if you do feel anxious, I encourage you to talk to somebody. Talk to your parents. Have a courageous conversation with your parents or with your friends. And if you see these hate events happening, step up, speak out. If you can't physically intervene, there is a program. It's a free program. It's called Holla Back, and within this, and I'll put it in our bio or our link, or I don't know how IGTV works or how YouTube works or whatever. But there is a program called Holla Back, and it teaches you, it trains people how to intervene without physically putting yourself in harm's way. Because somebody mentioned, if somebody's coming after a student with a knife, would you step in? And I don't know. As I said before, my brain sometimes goes berserk, and I'm like, yeah, because I'm going to protect my student. Now, my wife may not like that answer, but I'm going to protect my student. And I know that there are my colleagues who will do the same, because you are their student.
Hi, Clarksburg High School. My name is Amy Cho. I am a general assignment reporter at NBC4. And I just wanted to come on here and talk a little bit about the recent rise in anti-Asian hate. The Stop Asian Hate movement is something about which I am so passionate. Obviously, it's an issue that hits home for me. It is deeply personal. And I just wanted to share some of my personal experiences to let anyone out there who's struggling know that you are not alone, and let you know what we are doing in the news to try and raise awareness and hopefully put a stop to anti-Asian hate. So yeah, I've been at News 4 for about almost 5 years now. I've had a few incidents, unfortunately, of anti-Asian hate directed towards me on the job. A few years ago, a viewer tweeted at me that he is, quote, a white supremacist, but that if he sees an Asian cutie, he wants to turn his bloodline into a mudline. Another time, a viewer tweeted at me, she thinks my arms are too thin and that all Asians are obsessed with being skinny, to which I responded that we are all different. We're not the same. We're not obsessed with being skinny. So those are just a few examples. Also going back to high school, when I was a senior in high school and I had just gotten into my dream college, Cornell University, and one of my what I thought was best friends at the time texted me, congrats Chink, which she had never called me that before. I don't know where that came from. So that definitely, kind of put a damper on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. So yeah, those are just a few examples of what I have experienced. And throughout my time at News 4, I have done a number of stories on anti-Asian hate incidents. Every time someone is willing to share their story with me, I am truly honored and grateful, and I try my very best to do their story justice. Just today, literally today, I did a story on a shop owner who is Chinese, and he says a customer was upset about the store's policy of not letting people open items inside the store. And so this customer punched the store owner and then was yelling, F you Chinese, I hate Chinese people. The shop owner had to go to the hospital. He had to get 14 stitches. It was just so heartbreaking. I spoke with him and his wife. His wife was also there at the time. She saw the whole attack unfold and she tried to step in and try to calm things down. But it was just so heartbreaking to hear of the fear that they're experiencing now. They still have to go back to the doctor and make sure everything's okay, and that his lip is healing properly. So just so heartbreaking. They told me they did nothing wrong. They don't understand why this person attacked them simply for stating the store's policy. Another example of anti-Asian hate that I've covered recently is a group of 3 Asian restaurants in Columbia, Maryland that were burglarized on Lunar New Year. We saw surveillance video of people breaking in, shattering the store windows and doors and rummaging through the cash register, taking money, things like that. And this is supposed to be one of the happiest days in Asian culture is Lunar New Year. So it was really unfortunate that it happened on that day of all days. So I covered that. And then another incident I covered was a young woman last summer who was having a picnic with her friends outdoors in Fairfax when she says a stranger came up wanting to know their ethnicities. They didn't want to tell him. And then that's when he got angry and started yelling, go back to your own country, threatening to hit them on the head with a rock, things like that.
Go to your own country. Go to your own country, dreamer.
So of course they were extremely afraid, and we have the video of this man getting so angry at them and yelling these threats. And of course, I'm sure you all have seen, the incidents nationally, especially in New York and the San Francisco area, all the elderly Asians getting assaulted while simply out and about, going grocery shopping, running errands, things like that. So yeah, it's been really, really hard to see all of that. I'm sure so many of you, like myself, are worried for your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles. But at the same time, it's not all doom and gloom. I want to reassure you guys, I've also seen so many promising signs of hope in my time as a news reporter. I've seen so many posts on social media, people saying stop Asian hate, standing in solidarity. And I think even just a simple post on social media really does go a long way. It shows that we are not going to stand for this. This is not right what's happening. We need to put a stop to it. And as well as people sharing surveillance video of attacks does help the police in getting leads and making arrests in cases. We've seen many times that police have been able to track down suspects because of tips brought in by social media. So that is definitely one of the positives that's come out of all the heightened awareness of anti-Asian attacks. I've also seen so many people saying support your local Asian businesses, things like that. So that's been really awesome to see. And then for folks who are looking to get involved and wondering what they can do to help, there's actually a free online bystander intervention class. It's put on by Asian Americans Advancing Justice. It's only an hour long. It's all online, completely free of charge. They teach you different tactics for what to do if you see Asian Americans or really anyone getting harassed. Tips on de-escalation, how to record cell phone videos safely, creating distractions, things like that. So very useful information, highly recommend it. We have more information on those trainings on the NBC Washington website, nbcwashington.com, as well as you can also Google Asian Americans Advancing Justice. You should be able to find the information pretty easily. But yeah, I've heard so many people have signed up for these trainings ever since the rise in anti-Asian hate began. So there are so many people out there who are wanting to be allies, wanting to step up, and wanting to know what they can do to help. So that has been very encouraging. And I know it can be tough to see everything that's going on in the news lately, all of these awful cell phone videos and headlines. But at the same time, so much positivity, so many people standing in support and showing their solidarity. So I really do feel like hope is on the horizon.
Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next episode of Coyote C.A.R.E.S. Take care.